is on the line with me, and he is calling from the state of Florida, of which right now is in the pathway of Irma. So we're sending a lot of prayers and positive energies and blessings and everything to the folks in the state of Florida and anyone who is in the path of Irma, because she has been extremely busy. She has been a busy woman or a busy girl, however you want to call it, however you want to classify her, whether it be a girl or a woman or what have you. But she has been busy and destructive as she's made her way up the Caribbean and now is headed toward the United States. First state being Florida. They're talking about the possibility of Irma making her way all the way up through Georgia and the Carolinas. So it is soon to be seen, but we truly hope that the damages and everything else is as minimal as possible. My guest this morning is, and I shared with you last week that he would be with me this week, Bob Burg. And Bob Burg shares information on topics vital to the success of today's business person. He speaks for corporations and associations internationally, including Fortune 500 companies, franchises, and numerous direct sales organizations. Bob regularly addresses audiences ranging in size from 50 to 16,000, sharing the platform with notables including today's top thought leaders, broadcast personalities, Olympic athletes, and political leaders, including a former United States president. Although for years he was best known for his book, Endless Referrals, over the past few years, it's his business parable, The Go-Giver, co-authored with John David Mann, that has captured the imagination of his readers. The Go-Giver, a Wall Street Journal and Business Week bestseller, has sold over 650,000 copies. Since its release, it has consistently stayed in the top 25 on the 800 CEO Reads Business Book Bestsellers list. It has been translated into 21 languages. It was rated number 10 on Incorporated Magazine's, or rather Inc. Magazine's list of the most motivational books ever written, and was on HubSpot's 20 most highly rated sales books of all time. Bob is the author of a number of books on sales, marketing, and influence, with total book sales of well over 1 million copies. The American Management Association named Bob one of the top 30 leaders in business and was named one of the top 200 most influential authors in the world by Richtopia. Bob is an advocate, supporter, and defender of the free enterprise system, believing that the amount of money one makes is directly proportional to how many people they serve. Now, that's an interesting line. The amount of money one makes is directly proportional to how many people they serve. The key word in that is serve. That's why I reiterate it. He is also an unapologetic animal fanatic and served on the board of directors of Furry Friends Adoption Clinic in his town of Jupiter, Florida. Welcome to the Reading Circle microphones, Bob Burg. Bob, good morning.
Good morning, Mark. Always great to be with you.
It is great to be with you as well. And as I shared with you prior to us coming on the air, I truly enjoyed your book. I got one of the ones in the series, and I'm going to go back and read the original. But I read The Go-Giver Leader. And that's what prompted me to get in touch with Bob. I got in touch with him, I believe, first on Twitter, and then took it from there in terms of inviting him on the show. And I'm so glad he accepted, because the concepts of what Bob is talking about, I truly believe in my heart. There's two things, Bob, that my audience, they know I'm big on gratitude in terms of being thankful and grateful. And they know I'm big on giving. And so when I read your book, it was right. You speak my speak, as they can say. You're speaking my speak. And I said, I got to get him on this line so that we can share this with my audience. And hopefully, first off, folks will go out. I encourage you to get the books. Probably, I would say, don't do like I do and skip. I would probably say go to the original and then work your way up into the series. But if you do it the other way, that's fine too. Because the bottom line is we really need you to get the principles. And that's why I know for a fact the book has done so well, is because of exactly what Bob is talking about in terms of the being proportional to your service. Because there is a connection between giving and receiving.
Sure.
It really is. But a lot of people, believe it or not, they really don't believe that. Or, and I was saying this a couple of weeks ago, that the motivation will mess it up. You will go into it with the ideal, I'm going to do this to get that. And if you do that, if you go in there with the intent of, I'm going to give this to get that, a lot of times it may or may not come the way you want it. But if you give freely and do what you do, it comes back to you in other different ways. And that's what we're going to be talking about this morning. So let somebody know that Bob Burg is on the air. We're talking about his book, The Go-Giver, as well as all his other work. Because, Bob, my first question is usually kind of like, where did it all begin? So that's kind of like my standard first question, if you will, in terms of where did this whole, the writing, the sharing with people, where did it all begin? Because I see here in your bio, it says you're originally best known for endless referrals. And then when you wrote The Go-Giver, then you became best known for that. So let's talk about where did it all begin?
Well, Endless Referrals was a business book I wrote back in the early 90s. And that was basically for salespeople and entrepreneurs, Mark, who didn't feel, they knew they had a product or service that they loved, they knew was of great value, they knew could help a lot of people, and they knew they could make a great living by successfully selling it. But they didn't feel comfortable necessarily with the process of building relationships and being able to find new, qualified, prospective customers. And so it was really a book on how to build relationships with people in a way that was congruent with one's values. So you could do it in a way that you were focused, instead of having to focus on yourself and your product, which is nerve-wracking for a lot of people.
Right.
Because, to go and say, hi, my name is so-and-so, I do this and this and this and that. It's not natural.
Right. I agree.
But when we can go in and we can focus on this other person and we can ask them questions about themselves, which makes the conversation a lot more fluid, it makes it more comfortable for everyone, and it communicates to this other person that, unlike most of the other salespeople they meet, that you're there looking out for their best interest,
right,
where authenticity comes into play, because you need to really, what happens is this person feels good about you. They begin to want to be in relationship with you. The theme throughout Endless Referrals was that, all things being equal, people will do business with and refer business to those people they know, like, and trust. So the book became a big seller in the corporate world and in the entrepreneurial world and so forth. But through the years, I'd always read a lot of business parables. Starting, I think, with Doc Mandino's The Greatest Salesman in the World,
right,
James Classen's Richest Man in Babylon,
right,
which through a story showed how to invest, basically, and how to build a good financial future. And then there were the books, the 1 Minute series that came out in the late 70s, early 80s.
Correct.
Ken Blanchard, Spencer Johnson, The 1 Minute Manager, 1 Minute Salesperson, 1 Minute Apology, right? And I'd read many, many other parables, and I always loved them, because I think, and you know this as a school principal, as a leader, you know that stories connect with people.
Correct.
They connect on a heart level. You could tell someone, you can tell a student, hey, you should study because blah, blah, blah. But when you tell a story of someone who did, who utilized, now it's a whole different.
That's correct.
So I thought, wouldn't it be great if we could take the basic principles from Endless Referrals and put it into a parable? Now, I'm a how-to writer, and I think anyone can write a how-to book. You write down what you know, or what you think you know. Sometimes those two aren't the same.
Right.
But writing a story, a parable, it takes really a gift, and I happened to have known a fantastic writer and an amazing storyteller who was also a great entrepreneur himself, whose name is John David Mann. And he was the co-author of he was the editor-in-chief of a magazine I was writing for. And in the niche that John, now you walk into a bookstore, there's always books that are either co-authored by John or ghostwritten by John that are New York Times bestsellers. But back then, he wasn't very well known. He was very successful, but within a specific niche. Well, fortunately, I knew who John was.
Right.
So I asked John if he would be the lead writer and storyteller. And when I say I asked him, I mean I pleaded with him, because he was the only guy I wanted to do this with. And fortunately, he said yes, and so we co-authored the original Go-Giver book. So that's how it really came about. And he was a joy to work with.
Actually, I'm going to have him on the show at some point too. I have to get him
good.
scheduled because I know I think around that same time I was tweeting and emailing you, we had corresponded, and I lost touch with him. I have to get back in touch with him to get him scheduled.
Well, he has a new book. He has 2 new books out, by the way. One with Brandon Webb,
right?
Who's a former Navy SEAL.
Correct.
And he also has one he just wrote with Chef Charles Carroll, who's an Olympic gold medalist chef. And yes, there is such a thing. And the story that they wrote together was just an absolutely beautiful story. I mean, I just can't speak highly enough of it. And so, yeah, John always is a great interview because he's, very witty, and he's just a brilliant guy and a good guy.
Well, I'll probably be reaching back out again to him today, especially now that you and I have talked, to say I need to get you scheduled as well. And I talked to Bob this morning. I want to get you on as well. So, but okay, that makes a lot in terms of how it moved. And it's interesting what you were saying about sales, because me, even though my undergrad, my first degree actually was in business administration, the sales piece of it to me was never, ever I always loved the marketing and the advertising piece, but the sales piece, even when my kids were selling candy and cookies and stuff for fundraisers in school, I hated asking people, would you like to buy? Would you like, now, I didn't want anybody come to me and ask that I buy something. I guess they saw sucker written all over my forehead, but it's for me having to ask somebody, that was really tough. So I understand what you're saying in terms of it doesn't feel natural, but when you turn it around and you help a person understand, this is how it's going to help you. It's really not about me, even though I want to make the sale, but it's more about how this product or this service or whatever it is going to make life better for you.
Mark, you bring up a great point, because selling can basically be defined as discovering what the other person wants, needs, or desires and helping them to get it. And that's the key. When you look at selling that way, it's other focused. It's about them. It's not about us. And that's the greatest salespeople, this is how they approach it.
Absolutely right. And they're the most successful. And the thing is, sometimes somebody would say, but isn't that manipulative? But really, it's not.
No, well, not unless you're, not unless you are manipulating someone. You know what I mean? If you're selling someone a bill of goods, well, any principle can be used for good or for evil. So use it for good. I mean,
that's absolutely right.
Yeah, and the evil part, don't do that.
Right. And see, I'm sure people, those of you in the listening audience, I'm sure you've heard the term, or maybe you haven't, but if you have, I'm sure you've heard win-win. And that's where everybody in the scenario, if it's a sales scenario, the salesperson wins because they've done what they were supposed to do, which was move the product. But if you're the buyer and you've gotten something that is going to make life better, you've won also.
Of course. Well, in any free market-based exchange, and when we say free market, we mean no one is forced to buy from anyone else. People do it on their own volition. In any free market-based exchange, there are always 2 profits. The buyer profits and the seller profits, because both of them come away from the transaction better off than they were before the transaction. This is why you may remember the great speaker and author and salesperson Zig Ziglar, whose most famous saying, often misquoted, but the actual saying is, you can have everything in life you want if you will just help enough other people get what they want. That's
correct. And matter of fact, on one of my emails, it's in my signature. That particular quote is in my signature on one of my email addresses. I have several, and I know on one of might be a couple of email addresses, that's my signature line in it, because it is so true. Mm-hmm. And it goes back to where we're headed, because I'm going to take a short break. Listening audience, you know what to do. You are to get on all your social media sites. I mean, every last one of them. And let somebody know that Bob Burg is on the air with me. They ought to tune in anywhere in the world on gobrave.org. And if you're in the northern New Jersey, New York area, we're on FM radio, WP 88.7 FM. Let somebody know that Bob is on the line, because the concepts we're talking about are true. They are real. And they are needed in a time like this, where things are like, people feel like everybody is so self-serving, or they feel like things are so bad, or everything is so negative, because there's another word I'm looking for as I say these words. But folks a lot of times really have a really sad outlook on things based on the way things are going in the world. Case in point, Irma and all the various storms, this and that. So when we start talking about things that actually make a difference in folks' lives on a positive level, and as you just heard Bob said, in the transaction, neither are forced, but they both win. So let somebody know that Bob is on the air with me, that we're talking about some concepts that are true. And I'll share a little bit whenever in our conversation, a little bit of the conversation Bob and I had before coming on the air on people's perceptions of the concepts that we're talking about.
I want to thank my mommy for loving me so much,
for taking me to the doctor when I broke my foot,
for leaving me alone when I wanted to be alone.
And now, as a grown-up, I'm thankful for being able to take care of you, my dear mom, for taking you to your therapies, for understanding that sometimes you simply want to be alone.
Roles change without us noticing. That's why AARP gives you the information to provide even better care for your loved one. Visit aarp.org/caregiving. Brought to you by AARP and the Ad Council.
Today we decided to walk to school. At the corner, we waited to cross the street. The stoplight counted down. 15, 41, 31, 13. We took a left on Carroll Garden Street.
Garden Street?
Loud music was coming from a car. Danny's a smart kid, but he gets so distracted.
There were so many other sounds, I didn't know what to focus on.
Danny, Earth to Danny. Suddenly, he realized he forgot his homework again.
I left my homework on the table.
At the school steps, we hugged goodbye. I really hope he doesn't have another bad day at school today.
When you can see learning and attention issues from their side, you can be on their side. That's why there's Understood.org, a free online resource for the parents of the 1 in 5 kids with learning and attention issues. Get personalized recommendations, practical tips, daily access to experts, and more. Go from misunderstanding to Understood.org. Brought to you by Understood and the Ad Council.
You're listening to The Reading Circle with Marc Medley on Brave New Radio.
Yes, indeed you are. You're listening to The Reading Circle right here on, as we just said, Brave New Radio, WP 88.7 FM and GoBrave.org. My special guest this morning is Bob Burg, and he is the author of The Go-Giver. Now, Bob, whenever I was a teacher, prior to becoming principal, I was a language arts teacher. I taught English, or they call it ELA, or language arts, and I've always loved words. And your book for me was a wonderful play on words, because most of the time, whenever we see that term, the go dash, the word behind it is getter, the go getter. And your book is the go giver. And if somebody were to be walking through the bookstore really quickly and pass that, in their mind, it would probably automatically go to the word getter. And then once it registered that it said giver, they would probably do a backtrack to say, let me see what that's all about.
Right. Exactly. It's called a pattern interrupt.
Exactly. So his book, we talked about a couple of minutes ago prior to the break, Endless Referrals, but the book that really took off, as he was sharing about and was co-author with John David Mann, was The Go-Giver. And the principles in that book, as a matter of fact, I'm going to read one of the lines from the introduction in The Go-Giver Leader. A giving mindset is the key to a rich and fulfilling life. And then it goes on to say, one of those 5 laws is the law of influence, which says that your influence is determined by how abundantly you place other people's interests first. Now, we live in a world that many people feel that we're very self-centered, that everything is about me, it's all about me. And what we're saying is counter to that no, it's not all about you. Actually, if you really want to do well, you need to focus on other people. Talk to me a little bit about that, and then you can kind of give the concept, if you will, or the parable in a synopsis, because we want folks to buy the book. We know Bob's not going to give it away. You have to go out there and buy it to read the parable, because it's a good read. It's a good parable, and it's one that'll make you think. It's fun. You stay along with it. So let's talk about that whole line that I just talked about, the giving mindset.
Sure. Well, when we say the very premise of the Go-Giver is simply that shifting your focus, and this is the key, shifting your focus from getting to giving. Now, when we say giving in this context, we simply mean constantly and consistently providing value to others. And that doing so is not only a pleasant way to conduct business or live life, what have you, it's also a very financially profitable way as well. Not for any woo-woo, way out there reasons. It just, when you think about it, makes sense, because to the degree that you focus on bringing value to others, that's the degree people feel good about you. They know you, they like you, they trust you. So when we say place the other person's interests first, please understand, we do not mean you should be anyone's doormat or a martyr or self-sacrificial in any way. Absolutely not at all. It's just simply understanding that to the degree that your focus is on bringing value to others, they're going to respond to that in a very positive way. Let's look at it from a salesperson's point of view first. Okay? If you are a salesperson and you have a prospect in front of you, which of these two scenarios is more likely to end up in their buying from you? If you're totally focused on their money, if you're focused on not on them but on yourself, if you're focused just on transferring their money from their pocket to your pocket, no, they're most likely not going to feel good about you. They're most likely not going to trust you. They're going to say, but what if, from the moment you meet that person, you're focused on bringing value to them. You ask them questions to discover what they want, what they need. You listen. You listen in order to understand them, in order to empathize with their situation, in order to be able, and only once you truly understand their information do you begin to match the benefits of your product or service with what they want, what they need, what they desire. Are they more likely or less likely to buy from you? Well, probably more likely. So it's just good business to focus on the other person. Now, you brought up a great point. You said, about people being, self-centered and well, you know what? Part of human nature is that we are what we call self-interested, right? I mean, we think about us more than other people think about us. But you know what? That's human nature.
Correct.
So what we say is, it's not that we want you to forego your self-interest, or that we want you to deny it, because that wouldn't be correct. It would be lying to ourselves. What we would say is, set it to the side. Okay? Just like when you go into a movie, we've all heard the term, the willing suspension of disbelief.
Right.
We know we're going into a movie. It's just a movie. We're watching something up on a screen. We're eating popcorn, right? We know it's over. James Bond is not cracking a joke when some terrorist points a gun at his head.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, in real life, right? But we do that to enjoy it. We know, because we know he's not really going to die.
Correct.
Well, so that's what we do. We don't forego our self-interest, but we consciously set it aside, and it needs to be done in a genuine, authentic way. And when we do this, we become a lot more effective as a salesperson. We certainly become a lot more effective as a leader. As a principal, your focus is on equipping your teachers and creating the environment for them to serve their students.
That's correct.
So it's all leadership. When you think of it, you're serving your teachers. The teachers are serving the students and parents.
Absolutely. That's it. I mean, and interesting again, I'm going through, as I look through the Go-Giver Leader, exactly what you were just talking about, and I'm going through the parts that I'd even highlighted. The best way to increase your own influence is to give it away.
That's right.
Pindar's paradox.
Yes.
And when I was in grad school, when I was doing the master's in education, our theme for my particular cohort was share the power. And it was exactly what you were saying. And that's the way I manage and the way I lead. And we were talking about this on the air. A lot of people think, you're like, wait a minute, but how come you're like, I have vice principals, and I honestly have them, let's say, the areas that you're in charge of, you're principal of. I'm looking for you in terms of that to run it, even though ultimately as the principal, I'm going to make the final call. But I am not going to run this as a dictatorship. And it's been my experience as I've worked more in various organizations like that, and sharing the power or sharing the influence or like this is giving away to power. I mean, everybody, it's kind of like when Donald Trump walks into the room, he does not necessarily have to have a shirt on that says President of the United States. We all know that. And it's the same thing with me. If I walk into the room in my particular building, I don't have to have on a shirt that says principal. You know that. So folks know that. So you give your power away, and ultimately you do get more back.
Absolutely. And, there are, while we tend to hear the stories about the bad leaders, and certainly there are plenty, there are so many great leaders out there. There are people who just, do a wonderful, fantastic job of leading organizations by equipping those and teaching their leaders how to lead and how to develop, and it's so inspiring when you see it. And I get to work with a lot of these companies, and get to know some of these people. And you find just across the board, to the degree that the leader has a focus on others, a focus on bringing value to those they lead, to their organizations, those are the organizations that happen to be the most sustainably profitable as well.
And something you said earlier when you were talking about getting to know the person, because I said in terms of sales may not necessarily be my thing, but I do understand it. And the same thing with, the marketing piece. One of the things that they would teach in terms of getting to know folks is when you walk, and this I know when you walk into someone's office, do kind of like a scan of the artifacts and the pictures and everything they have in there, and then be able to strike up a conversation about something, whether it's one of their artifacts. I mean, if you see something on the person's desk dealing with golf, then start talking about golf. If you see something in terms of like in my office, I purposely lay out my office so that anybody coming in there, they can pick up on something, whether it's, okay, wait a minute, I see something about aviation in here. I see something about the military in here. I see something about your children in here. I see something about you. So there's enough things in my office that if somebody is really kind of astute, if they observe, there's enough things for them to make a connection. And I know that's one of the things they say when you walk in somebody's office, look for something to make a connection with them with.
Well, you can certainly see, what they value.
Right.
Right. And so anytime, you can connect their values with again, what your purpose is or what you're doing, well, you've got a connection there.
Right.
And so it just makes the process so much more comfortable for everyone involved. And any process, whether it's a sales process, leadership process, what have you, when you create the condition. See, I love what you did when you talked about setting up your office. You're creating the environment for people to feel comfortable and to get to know you right away. They see what you value as soon as they walk in. So assuming they're not a total narcissist, they are going to have a good idea of how to have a comfortable, productive conversation with you.
All right. You're absolutely right. I mean, they would literally have to be physically blind not to come up with something. I had one person tell me like, "Oh my God, your office is like a museum," and I was like, "Yeah, it's in purposely because two things. It does two things. One, when the kids are sent, how the dreaded kids sent to the principal office. Even the teachers dread coming to the principal's office. But it's like when a kid comes in there, I want it to be a classroom. Everything I can pull from in terms of talking or sharing experiences or whatever. So I want the kids to come in there and it to become a learning or a teaching experience. But from the standpoint of, like I said, if anybody else walks into the office, they have great conversation starters. And I do the same thing. If I walk into somebody's office, I'm looking around to say, how can I make a connection with this person? Exactly. And I'm looking here now. I'm going through again the Go-Giver Leader. And the Go-Giver Leader, now, because I haven't looked through the Go-Giver, is Ben the same character in the Go-Giver, or is Ben separate to the Go-Giver Leader?
No, Ben is a separate character. In the Go-Giver, Joe is the protege,
okay,
and Pindar is the main mentor. In the Go-Giver Leader, Aunt Elle is the main mentor,
right,
and Ben is the protege. But Ben was introduced to Aunt Elle through Melanie,
right,
who came in at the end of the story with the Go-Giver, and the restaurant they're eating in, Ernesto's Italian Cafe, Iafrate's Italian Cafe, was actually one of the main restaurants featured in the story. So people who read the Go-Giver will recognize some of the things in it.
Okay.
But those who haven't, it won't matter because it stands alone as it is.
Okay. Now, interestingly enough, Ben does everything that the average person would think that's what it takes to get ahead.
Right.
And I'm not going to give you the entire story because I do want to whet your appetite. I want you to read it. But there are certain things that we all say in society that these are the things you must do to succeed. And for the most part, Ben has done that. And now Ben gets an assignment where he has to now go in and he has to now work with some people to try to convince them that a takeover is a good thing. And Ben learns a lot throughout this process. And I'll leave it there. I won't get, like I said, I just want to whet your appetite. But the book it's a very, like I say, it won't take, if you're one of those people, which I can't imagine, if you're listening to a show called The Reading Circle, you're a person who don't like to read. But
right, exactly. Yeah. the title pretty much attracts the person who, yeah.
Exactly. But if you
don't like to read, hey, I think I'll listen to something called The Read. Right, yeah.
Exactly. But if you happen to be one of those folks who I don't like to read, this one you'll enjoy reading because it's relatively short and it moves very quick because you always want to see what's going to happen next. Like, what is Ben going to experience or learn next? So again, we were talking before we went on the air about a lot of times whenever we go down this track, this path, people think that's soft. And what I found is, no, this is not soft. It's actually, it takes more courage and it's even harder to do.
Yeah, well, it's contrary, right? To what they say is the correct way to do things. You know, Jeffrey, oh my goodness, and I'm trying to think of his name, and I just feel horrible that I'm not.
It'll come to you.
He's the editor at large at Fortune. He wrote a great book called "People Are Underrated." Jeff Colvin, and it's Geoff Colvin, Colvin. People Are Underrated, and he was talking about, and it was just a well-researched, just a fantastic book, and he was saying that, and made a great case, that technology has now gotten to the point that it's not a matter of asking, you know, what can humans do that technology can't? Because at this point, technology pretty much can.
Right.
And it's going to keep getting that way. He said, however, there are certain things that it's not that technology can't do, but that humans will not accept from technology, but only from other humans.
That's a good point.
And one of them is, traits such as empathy, caring, collaboration, team building. And what Jeffrey Colvin was saying was that as we continue to become more of a technology-focused world, the highest-paying jobs, the most valuable jobs, the most sought-out ones, will be those people who have those, what I call, people skills.
Right.
And people skills, Mark, have always proven to be the differentiator, the determining factor, the difference maker between those who've attained, success, a fair amount of success, which you can do by following the basic rule. You can attain a legitimate level of success. The difference between those people and that person who just attains enormous levels of success and achievement and just seems to have the world eating out of his or her hands.
No,
because,
you're absolutely right. I could not agree with you nor Jeff more because prior to moving back into education, I did some time in the telecommunications industry. And I was a part of a team that were putting in these automated voicemail, these automated, I'm trying to think of the name we call them. Whenever there's a name for whenever you call in to
that endless loop of frustration?
Right, that. And that's what came to mind whenever just now you were saying that there are some things that we as humans won't always accept. I can't imagine anybody who actually likes those prompts.
Exactly.
Because everybody, and I know I just went through it yesterday, you just want to get to a human being. Mm-hmm. Like I'm sitting there hitting 0, I'm saying representative, I'm saying operator, I'm saying get me to a person. So I could not agree with Jeff more. And then in terms of what you were saying prior to that, when I was saying it's contrary, that's another thing I love about the book is you get into different paradoxes. And another one of them is the less you say, the more influence you'll have. Now that is definitely counter.
Exactly. And yet you think about it, and it's so true. Are you more inclined to listen to the person who just yap, 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 or the person who asks questions, listens, thinks before they spout an idea? and they speak with respect and tact. And remember, tact should never be confused. And my dad has always defined tact as the language of strength.
Right.
And it takes a strong person to be tactful, to be empathetic. And, tact should never be confused with compromise. The two are not necessarily the same. Now, there's a place to compromise, of course, but the two are not necessarily the same. We can speak to people with tact and kindness and respect and still hold true to our principles.
That's correct. That is correct. And there's a couple of things going on in the Go-Giver Leader. And one of them in the beginning of the book is when Ben is talking to his wife, and the wife gives him a gift, and then she inscribes it with, "I believe in you." How important is the self-esteem issue?
Well, I remember that toward the end of his life, I had a lunch conversation with Zig Ziglar. I was in Dallas, Texas, and Zig and his son Tom, who's a great friend of mine, we were having lunch, and Zig said that the number one need today that we lack is encouragement. People are simply not encouraged enough, and part of encouragement is belief. It's believing in someone. Now, that doesn't mean a false belief, and it doesn't mean you give someone lip service. It does mean that if someone right now has not done a certain thing or proven themselves, you can still look into that person and find their strengths and communicate those strengths that allow them to build upon those strengths and continue to encourage and continue to believe in that person. Which is, again, part of leadership.
Correct. And again, for the listening audience, the particular book I'm referring to is The Go-Giver Leader. But the original, or the first book that the Go-Giver Leader came from was The Go-Giver. So I'm referring to the one that I've read. I'm going to go back and read the first one. But it's the concept keeps weaving its way within the book. There's a part in the book where there's like a catastrophe, and there's only one thing left, and it was a chair. And the only reason that chair wound up not in the catastrophe was because it had been given away.
Right.
So that concept keeps coming back throughout the story of because you give is the reason you have and the reason that you keep getting.
Yeah. I mean, that really is what it's about. And again, we like to make the point, there's nothing woo-woo about it. It's not magic. It just ties into human nature and principles of human interaction.
That's correct. And because it's so counter, and again, that's one of the reasons I loved it, because I truly believe in it. I mean, if you those of you who are Bible scholars, it is in there. I mean, I think it's in most of the books, whether it's the Bible, whether it's the Quran, whether it's the Torah, whether it's the Book of Mormon, whether that principle, it's in there. It runs through all of them. Mm-hmm. And it's that whole notion. And I said earlier, the intent or the motive from the beginning, you cannot have in your mind that, okay, the principle says if I give, I'm going to get. You can't go in there with that mindset, because that kind of like muddies the waters.
Right. It's not sustainable.
Right.
A manipulator can, sometimes, hey, we see it all the time. Let's face it. A manipulator can sometimes get a certain thing. Okay.
Right.
But once you've been manipulated by someone, you will not want to be around that person. You won't want to do business with that person. You certainly won't refer that person or speak highly of that person. And you're certainly not you're going to make sure you're not manipulated by them again. And no matter how good a person is at being a con artist, eventually they either get caught or their reputation gets ruined, and they live a life that's a very difficult life. And so and it's just no fun to be that way.
Absolutely.
There's so much more we can get out of life by just being a truly caring person who wants to bring value to others.
Correct. Now, I couldn't agree with that, and that's why I keep emphasizing the point, because I don't want anyone to walk away from the interview saying that we're saying put in your mind, hey, I'm going to do this to do that. Because again, I'm going through my notes here. There's a difference between being a manipulator. It's the difference between manipulation and influence. And I'm looking here where it says the word influence means an unseen flow of power.
Right. And, and we give an example in there about an air conditioner. And the reason it's able to cool an entire room is because of its pull, not because of its push.
Right.
And, we say that's the same with influence. What is influence? Well, we can say that it's the ability to move a person or persons to a desired action within the context of a specific goal. That might be a definition, but that's not its essence. The essence of influence is pull as opposed to push. How many times do you hear someone say, oh, that Dave or that Mary, she's so influential, she has a lot of push with people. She's so pushy. We just love her. Right now, you say the person has a lot of pull.
That's right.
Gently pull. They attract. Influence is an attraction. We attract people to ourselves first, then, and only then to our ideas. And what's interesting is, what you have to give, you offer least of all through what you say. Now, what you say is important. We need to speak to people with kindness and respect, as we mentioned. But it's the least important. More important, of course, is what you do. But most important is who you are.
Right.
And that's where character comes into play. And, we talk about character coming from an old Greek word meaning scrape or scratch. It came to mean an engraved marking and eventually a defining quality. Now, if one were to wax poetic, one could say that influence or character is what happens when life etches or scratches itself onto your soul. But I'm not particularly poetic, so I like a defining quality.
Right.
Perhaps more accurately, the sum total of all one's qualities is their defining quality or their character. Now, Mark, one thing we see with people of high character, they tend to stand for something.
Right.
And we always know where they stand, which doesn't mean we always agree with them. It doesn't mean they don't make mistakes. They're human. Of course they do. It doesn't mean they don't course correct. They're humble enough to do so, absolutely. And it doesn't mean that they're not flexible on strategy. They may be flexible on strategy, but when it comes to those value-based decisions, they are immutable, unchangeable. They are absolutely steady as a rock, and that's one reason why we respect them. They have high character, and that is the greatest influencer of all.
Absolutely. I could not agree more. Another line from the book, and this is one that I use in the school in terms of the students and the teachers and the parents and everyone else, where it says, give people something good to live up to, something great, and they usually will.
Exactly. Winston Churchill was famous. If you want someone to have a particular quality, impute it to them.
Correct.
Give them that quality. And they will often come through. People will often live up to the belief you have. And this goes right back to what you said about belief and what Zig Ziglar said about encouragement. Because people will do their best to live up to, not everyone when we say, but mostly, they will do their best to live up to the belief someone has in them. I mean, again, that's human nature.
Correct. Matter of fact, I was sitting here thinking, I think what I'm going to do is, I think I'm going to blow this up. I'm going to make it into banner size so that folks can constantly see those particular words together. Give people something good to live up to, something great, and they usually will. Mm-hmm. I might hang it over the main office door.
Okay. Well, thank you. I take that as a great compliment.
I might, because I'm big into visuals. I'm big into words and visuals and pictures and all that. I want folks as they're walking through the hallways to constantly be hit with something positive or something for them to think about. And so I think sitting here thinking about it, because ideas pop into my head as I'm doing these interviews with people. That's why one thing I love about doing the show is I've met some wonderful people over the years, and I learned just as much from them as we talk, as I hope, the listening audience learns from me or what have you. But that's always been the wonderful thing about this is literally ideas will pop into my head as I'm talking to folks on a Saturday morning.
Yeah.
So in terms of some of your other work, I'm looking here, Adversaries into Allies. And we're talking again about that art of influence.
Mm-hmm.
So okay, and I think again, back with the words. Now we have adversary, which begins with an A. We're talking alliteration here. Begins with an A, into allies. Now you're turning an enemy into a friend. Let's talk a little bit about that.
Well, and that's exactly what it is. The sages of old, the sages from the Talmud asked the question, who is a mighty person? And the answer was that person who is strong enough to control their own emotions and turn an enemy or turn a potential enemy into a friend. When you can do that, that is truly powerful, and it's the most benevolent type of power there is. It's like when Abraham Lincoln said, I don't like that man very much. I'm going to have to get to know him better, right?
That's right.
But to do that, we need to first control our own emotions. We need to get control of our own egos, and we need to understand that there's a much greater purpose that we can utilize that for. So, it's only when we're in control of our emotions, control of ourselves, that we're even in a position to take a potentially negative situation or person and turn it into a win for everyone involved.
Absolutely
so we talk
correct.
about five principles in that the 5 principles of ultimate influence. That's a how-to book.
Okay.
That, to me, it's my most important how-to book I've ever written.
Okay.
And but yeah, that's and I based that work really while I've studied, of course, influence and persuasion and people skills, and read all sorts of books. My biggest hero in that regard is my dad,
right?
Who to me is just has always been the most amazing person with when it comes to people skills, and it's always been because of his genuine focus on others. And one of the sayings I have in the book, and while my dad never said this to me, it embodies everything about my dad, and it's that the single greatest people skill is a highly developed and authentic interest in the other person.
That's right.
And we would go somewhere as a family, and by the time we went somewhere twice, everyone there loved my dad. Because he just had such a caring. Now, my mom also, a very lovely, wonderful woman. That I was very blessed to be brought up by those two. But Dad and I tend to be the ones in the family who are the more in the public spotlight, if you will. And so when I would watch him, how he was with people in such a genuine, kind way, truly interested in them, and just everyone was attracted to him.
And see, as I heard you give that description, there's one word I heard you say each time you gave it, and it is the key to this thing, going back to what we were talking about earlier in terms of the difference between influence and manipulation. And that was the word you said, genuine.
Genuine, right.
It has to be real, and people can feel real. That's the thing. People can feel sincerity. They can feel real. They can feel genuineness. So they know, even if you think they don't know that you're manipulating them, folks know when they're being manipulated, and they can feel that. And I heard you say that word twice, genuine. And I tell people all the time in terms of kids, I said, for children, there's 2 audiences. Oh, no, let me say it this way. There are 2 audiences that pick up on genuineness and sincerity more so than others. Not that the other audiences don't, but 2 audiences that really feel the vibe or connect with it are children and seniors. Those 2 audiences can peep out sincerity quicker than anybody else. So for like in the community I serve, it's an urban area. The kids are challenged in many ways, and because of their challenge in so many other ways, it impacts their academics. But Bob, when I tell you they may struggle academically, but they never miss sincerity. If I have a teacher that comes through with sarcasm, or they say something that they think the kid can't read between the lines, they lose every time. The kid knows exactly what they were saying. They know exactly what they feel about them. They know exactly what they're feeling from him or her. So kids pick up on sincerity. They know when you're in it for the real deal. And as I heard you just describe your dad, that's exactly what's going on. The audiences he was dealing, they knew this man is for real. Like he's just not going through the motions. He's just not putting on a show. And and people do connect with that.
Yeah, I agree with you. Just 100%. Absolutely.
So, Anything else? What are we doing beyond? Because when we get down to the near the end of the interview, I tend to shut the mic off and let the guests promote, and they can say anything with the exception of the price of whatever the dollars amount. You can work that out with the people getting in touch with you. But in terms of how folks can get a copy of the book, websites, book signings, get you to come speak, this is your opportunity to promote.
Well, my only suggestion would be if they go to the website, which is thegogiver.com, without the hyphen in this case. It's hyphenated in the story, but on the website it's just thegogiver.com. They can scroll down that page. They can subscribe if they'd like to the podcast. They can join the Go Giver movement. All that's no cost, of course. And they can also, at no cost, they can download the Chapter 1 of any of my books, excerpt in Chapter 1 of the Go Giver, Go Givers Sell More, the Go Giver Leader, Adversaries into Allies, Endless Referrals. And they can connect with me on social media all over the place. You and I are connected on Twitter, of course. And so I just welcome them to come to thegogiver.com and hang around and have some fun.
Yeah, it is. And again, I thank you so much for rising this morning. And as I said earlier, our listening audience, Bob is in the Florida area. So, Bob, we're sending our prayers and positive energy and everything out of you that the storm misses you. I hope it misses the entire state. I mean, I don't think that's going to happen. But, hey, strange things happen. You never know. Yeah. You get enough people that's putting out that positive energy, the storm may go on out.
You never know.
Certainly we hope that, you and your family and your possessions and everything do well. And for everybody else, for that matter, in the state. One other question I will ask you, though, because I know the answer to it, but I'm going to ask it anyway. I hate commentators that do it, but I'm going to do it anyway. In terms of because the question I'm going to ask you to answer is going to speak to the principle itself. But when you wrote The Go Giver, did you have any imagination that it was going to perform as well as it performed?
I thought that it would be well accepted in the marketplace. I did think it was going to be a hit. Whether we knew it was going to get this big and kind of really become a movement, I don't know that we necessarily knew that.
Right.
But we felt there was a market for it, and that it would be, it would be a successful book.
And that's where I'm going in terms of the reason it went as big as it did, and the reason it has become a movement is because of the principle itself. You're talking about giving something away. You're talking about giving. And that, to me, is why it took off the way that it has, because it actually became evidence and proof of the principle. I'm going back to the original line in your bio. I read it twice whenever I was reading it. Bob is an advocate, supporter, and defender of the free enterprise system, believing that the amount of money one makes is directly proportional to how many people they serve. You're serving millions. You're serving. That's what I'm saying. The fact that you're serving them and that's why it's doing so well. That's where I'm going with it.
I appreciate that. What was interesting was the early adopters of the book were the ones who were already successful. They were already leaders, great salespeople, people who already had been utilizing these principles long before they ever read the book. And then they started referring it, to others and so
exactly.
forth. So the second wave of people were the people who maybe didn't know about. So that was very gratifying to know. And John and I always say there's nothing particularly original in the principles. People have been utilizing them for as long, right? It's just told in a story form, which, as we talked about earlier, just makes it easier to connect on a heart level with people, so that they're much more likely to take in the message and begin applying it.
No, you're right. And you said it earlier in terms of the use of story. That's what being able to. So when we talk about the story of Ben, when we talk about what Ben went through, it's in story form.
Right.
And again, you begin to make the connections. So it is my hope that the listening audience and anyone who will listen to the record, because I record these and then I put them up on my YouTube channel, and I'll send the MP3 link to you, and you can share it out any way you want. And so with the hopes is folks listening that will now in turn go out and either download on their Kindle or whatever The Go Giver, or either they'll go to their local book retailer and order it or pick it up, whatever, and read and continue to pass it along. That's the hope. That's why I was glad to have you on the air this morning, because those of you who are listening or who will listen, I highly encourage you to go out and get the Go Giver or the Go Giver Leader or the Go Giver, the one about sales, whichever one. I highly encourage you, any of them for that matter, but the Go Giver series, I highly encourage you to get it. And if you're already doing the principles, great. And if you're not, at least give it some consideration to say, maybe I will try that. Maybe I hadn't been looking at I hadn't thought about it that way. Maybe I will give this a try. Because, I mean, that one about silence, you actually, you have more influence with the less that you say. That's a hard one for some people.
Right.
The fact that if you're in the leadership role and you are the top dog or the top whatever, and at the end of the day, really, I mean, the buck stop here. What you say is the one that goes. And for somebody to come and say, you know what? Why don't you let some other folks make the call too? Or why don't you let some folks have some input into you making the call? That's hard for some people.
Sure.
The micromanagers.
It's counterintuitive, sure.
Right. The micromanagers, those that feel like if I want something done, I have to do it myself and all that. If I want something done right, I have to do it. That's hard. The principles, like I said, they're timeless. They are counter. So it is my hope and prayer that as those of you in the listening audience, you go out and get the Go Giver and you share it and pass it along. And as Bob said, if you want to become a part of the movement, you can go to his website. I actually was on your other website, the www.burg.com.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
I was on that one, but you have the Go Giver. What is it? Say it again.
Yeah, the GoGiver.com.
The GoGiver.com. There you go.
That's sort of the one now that has really kind of taken over.
Okay, so if you go to that one, you can become part of it, and then keep passing along, and the movement just continues to grow. All right. So, Bob, I thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Thank you for having me. What a delight.
Yeah, it's been fun. I'm inspired. I'm encouraged. I'm going to download the original. I'm gonna read the Go Giver. Even though I read the Go Giver Leader, I'm gonna go back and read the Go Giver as well. And I'm going to get in touch with John to have him come on as well.
Excellent.
All right. Okay. Well, I wish you nothing but the best to you and your family. Have a wonderfully blessed day, weekend, and like I said, I wish you the best with Irma.
Thank you. And likewise, have a great weekend, and wish you the best and all your listeners. And make it a fantastic day.
All right. Thank you, sir. Take care. All right. That brings us to the end of another edition of the Reading Circle with your host, Marc Medley. My guest this morning was Bob Burg. And the principles in this book, I'm telling you, they are so critical, especially in an environment where everybody thinks it's every man for himself. Everybody thinks it's dog eat dog. Everybody thinks, it's really, if you really want to succeed, I agree with Bob. It's just the opposite. So get a copy of the Go Giver. I saw I read the Go Giver Leader because I wanted to look at it from the perspective of leading. But I'm going to go back and get the original one in the series as well. The book is The Go Giver. It's THE, the Go -Giver. And as I said, I love a play on word. We are so accustomed to the go-getter. Wow, she's really a go-getter. Wow, he's a go-getter. Well, the book is saying be a go-giver.